Hey everyone, my name is Matt Phelan. I am co-founder of a business called The Happiness Index, and I am self-titled the head of global happiness, not because I think I am the head of global happiness, but because I like to share our data and information that we have on how people across the world are feeling. I'll share with you some of that data over the next 15 minutes, and I'll also share with you something that I've just written called Freedom to be Happy, the business case for happiness. So without further ado, introduce myself. I've told you about my role, but most importantly, I'm a father. For me, it's the most important thing that I do. I don't know how well I do, but I do try really hard at it, and it is something that I really do focus on and try and do to the best. I'm a geek, so I love data. I got into happiness because I'm a people watcher. I love trying to understand what makes people tick, what they're interested in, and this study into happiness really helps me do that. So if you want to connect, add me on LinkedIn, Twitter, and I would love to continue this conversation. So the book that I have out at the moment is called Freedom to be Happy, the business case of happiness. And the reason I wrote this book is because still to this day, despite all the research that's out there, and I'll share some of that with you in this presentation, not everyone thinks that happiness belongs in business. People don't understand that happier employees deliver better financial results. They don't understand that if you go into a hospital, that nurses and doctors that are happier deliver better care. That actually impacts mortality rates and death rates and infection rates, which in this current year of 2020, I don't think anything could be more important than that type of thing. So I'm going to take you through, I'm going to build it like a business case, and I hope you learn something, and please do message me. Anything, questions, just let me know. So I just want to kick off with some real-time data. There is no getting away from it, that 2020 has been a really tough year for me, for all of you there. And I just wanted to show you the numbers on it. On a scale of 1 to 10 across the world, so we collect data in 90 plus countries. We're talking about 500,000 employees here, and we are anonymously understanding how they feel. So we were in the 7s before coronavirus, but after that, happiness substantially dropped. It went down to about 5.8 in sort of the early summer period, and it actually went up to around 6.3 in August. But in September, we had a sharp decrease again. And that is down to lots of different reasons, which I'll talk you through. But the main reason for understanding this point is that happiness leads to performance at work. There's a lot of research out there. Lots of people think that if you spend your whole life doing well at school, then getting a good job, getting promoted, and so on, you will then be happy. The research going back to 2005 shows that actually it's the other way around. If you're happy, you will perform better. And I would personally say, going back to the thing as me as a father, by being happier, I do perform better as a father and hopefully at work. But you can ask my team about whether that's true or not. So just quickly into some of the real-time data. This is a really encouraging thing for me around coronavirus, and something that everyone needs to understand. Employees across the globe have had a substantial increase in how much they want to share their feelings. So as a leader in any kind of business or organization, in my opinion, at this point, you only have two options. You can either listen to people or you can ignore people. And that's it. They're your only two options. But what I can tell you from my customers, people that work with the Happiness Index, the leaders that I know that listen more and act on what they are hearing have happier employees, and the companies perform financially better. These are the themes. I'm going to leave these with you, but people are really feeling uncertain about the future. And the one nugget I want to leave you with is that you don't have to have all the answers. I've seen really good leadership in across the world where it's okay to say you don't know. It's okay to be a CEO of a business and the employees say, when are we going back to the office? And for you to say, I don't know, but these are the things we're trying to do that help. Human beings just want to be communicated with. So throughout coronavirus, that need from people to communicate has increased. So leadership and us, we need to make sure we are there continually communicating with our teams and our people. And my main message on this is the main message is what we call don't pull up the drawbridge. All those things about how people are feeling bad, as I said, so do I, so do you. So one of the natural instincts when you feel stressed is, from an evolutionary perspective, is flight, is to run away, is to hibernate. Remember that it's really important that you get out there and communicate and don't pull up that drawbridge. Your people want to speak to you, so make sure you're there front and center speaking to them. Why happiness? The reason we talk about happiness is that our research, and this scans from data collection in real time using AI to neuroscience and crazily even more recently more quantum mechanics type stuff, is that we believe businesses blocked out emotions from work. And if you look at the latest research, that blocking emotions out of work negatively impacts lots of factors in a human being. And I'll just name two: problem solving and memory. There's even more than that. There's a list of 6 things that it negatively impacts. But it's time at work for us to banish terms like that person's too emotional. I've definitely been labelled that. Or it's unprofessional for someone to cry at work. Those emotions are human, they're being human. We should be allowed to express them at work. There's a difference between emotions and bad behaviour. If I was to be angry and I was to get a hammer and I was to smash up all the office, that's still bad behaviour and that shouldn't happen. But I need to understand why I feel that emotion. So we've brought the heart and the brain back together because we feel like businesses disconnected the heart from the brain, and we need to bring the two back to get the best out of our human beings. So what is happiness? This is probably the hardest question that we all have, and it's not something I can answer today. But what's really important, in my opinion, is to measure it and ask people how they feel. Because what you will find out will be so valuable, it's so insightful. And everyone can, from Confucius through to through Greek philosophers, through to the like Roman and Greek Stoics, up to Sigmund Freud, through to modern psychology and some of the great researchers that are out there now doing this stuff. They're all trying to understand what happiness is, but I've stopped trying to understand what happiness is and try and just feel what happiness is. But let's ask some key questions on that, which is, can money make you happy? So the real data science, and this was passed on to me by a wellbeing expert, Phelan, is that to a degree money can make you happy. So if you're in a third world country and money buys you clean water and better food, it will make you happy. But once you get to first world, all you're doing is buying a slightly better car or a slightly better flat, and it doesn't actually increase your happiness. There are some happiness tricks with money. For example, spending money on others. Generous people tend to be happier, and buying on experiences. So unfortunately, that new car that you think is going to make you happy probably isn't. But buying, for example, your mother some time with you would help make you happier. So the answer to can money make you happy is kind of, but I wouldn't make that your focus if happiness really is your goal. Is happiness nature or nurture? This is some great work here, which all the references will be in the presentation, which is the latest research shows that 50% of your happiness is DNA, so that you're born with. So there are people that are more happy than others, and that is genetic. 10% is our life circumstances, but 40% is what we call intentional activities. So we call that the way that we think. So there's still 40% of our own happiness that we can control ourselves. And I think if you're going to look up back into that history section of happiness, I think the Stoics make some really good points on that around only worrying about what you can control, because we do, as human beings, and I do, spend a lot of time worrying about stuff that's actually out of our control. So some really good reading in there that I would recommend. Is happiness a fluffy metric? Jeremy Dawson in the UK from Sheffield University did the study that I mentioned earlier, that if you go into a hospital with unhappy employees, there is an associated increase there's an association between employee happiness and mortality rate and infection rate. So essentially, there's just no way you can see it as a fluffy metric after reading that study. So I'd recommend you check it out. I have a podcast called Happiness in Humans. All the research that I talk about in here, I tend to have interviewed the professor or the researcher or the data scientist that's done that study. But check out the Jeremy Dawson one, and you can hear Jeremy and I having a long conversation around. And there's also a really important point on there on equality and racial inequality that I think I would highly recommend having a look at. But too much of that to get into today, but definitely check it out because it's incredibly important that we achieve equality in the workplace. So discovering happiness. I'm an entrepreneur. I set up when I was 25 years old a marketing agency called 4Ps Marketing, and there, as we scaled around the world, we realised that we had lost something that made us special, which was the happiness of our employees. And it wasn't until Caroline O'Keefe, one of our clients, said, "Why are you not tracking this? Why are you not measuring it?" That's when we built the Happiness Index, and we turned that into a separate business set up by my friend and co-founder Tony Latta. And then we had our first 2 employees, which one was my brother Pat, so very confusing, Matt and Pat Phelan, and Roma Varma. And they built a technology company that has collected all this information that I'm sharing with you today. Some practical tips: do look up dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, and endorphin. These are all the chemicals that are in our brain that we naturally experience different emotions with. My number one bit of advice here is to remember, don't see high happiness as good and low happiness as bad. Emotions are just something that we experience, and for the fellow data geeks out there, I just see them as data points. If you're feeling angry, try and understand why you're feeling angry. If you're feeling sad, why are you feeling sad? There's the medical side of this. Clinical depression is when no matter what you do, you can't come out of a depressed state. If you're in that situation, definitely consult a doctor. There is absolutely nothing wrong with that, and it should be the first bit of advice. But understanding how these chemicals work in that's not my brain, this is my brain, is really important. So I check out dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, and endorphin. If you want to hear, I mentioned the Happiness in Humans podcast, you could also hear from practitioners. So I define practitioners as leaders that are running businesses right now and using happiness to drive things like people and profit and revenue, all the things you don't always associate with happiness. As I said before, we're collecting data in, I think it's 95 countries now, and I want to share with you one really beautiful thing. Whether you're in America, whether you're in Brazil, whether you're in Argentina, wherever you are, happiness is a global thing. So we see differences in different countries, but the one thing that is totally universal is happiness. So if you're speaking to someone in an office in Sao Paulo, or you're speaking to someone in an office in Sydney, they are experiencing the same kind of happiness as you. So you might not be able to speak the same language, but like love, happiness is a universal thing that you can use to share and understand each other. And if we do need one thing more in the world in this day and age, is empathy. And if we can find universal things that help us understand people, happiness is certainly that. The neuroscience of happiness is something I touched on. We've purposely stopped talking about, which gets used a lot in business, which is a term called high performance culture. We believe that can be a negative and actually result in what we would call a competitive culture, We believe in something we call a thriving culture, because in a thriving culture, different types of personalities can be successful in your business. So this presentation comes with a slide deck. We've got a 4-box quadrant there. I'd absolutely love it if you plotted your own company on there and see where you are and talk about where you might want to go. But the reason we talk about happiness and engagement is that there's a lot of companies that try and think that employee engagement's here, this is what the company wants, and happiness is here, this is what the individual wants. In what our data and our research shows is that you need to balance happiness and engagement to achieve business success. So another presentation for another day to go through all of that with you, but I just wanted to share some of the highlights of that. And then when we talk about that, we talk about what we call instinctive, emotional, reflective and rational. And when I talked about earlier about businesses separating emotions here and businesses here, it doesn't mean rational thinking is not needed. Rational thinkers are needed, but not at the expense of emotions. And in the same way, we shouldn't bring emotions back into business at the expense of rational thinking. It's just all about seeing all these different things that your body and your brain is telling you and feeding them and seeing them as data points and feeding them back into the business. Introducing the quantum way, the happiness index, and lots of our clients, we work in a new way. Because if you're going to dismantle all of these big hierarchical structures, which I would recommend, you need something to put it in place. So don't dismantle an old system until you've done 2 things. 1, establish what your vision is, and 2, what your values are. Your values are the glue that are going to keep you together through good and bad times. The vision, I want you to imagine it like a solar system. The vision of your company becomes the sun. The sun is where you get your energy from and pulls everything in one direction, because you're not going to have command and control anymore. You're not going to have people saying, do it this way, do it that way. So what you need is this energy pull. So unless you've got that energy, that vision right, you're not going to have that pull of the business. And that means, in my opinion, leadership only have one role, which is to define and be the guardian and the custodian of that vision. So spend time finding a vision that excites you and your team and your company and your market. If you can't recite your vision or you're not excited by it, start again, scrap it up. And when I hear my vision at the Happiness Index, which is freedom to be human, like my heart leaps. It makes me want to go to work every day. Strive until you can define it in that particular way. The Quantum 9, this model has some light touch principles, which I'm going to leave in the deck, but it's around things like ownership, accountability, trust, growth and meaning, diverse teams, collaborative, self-aware, self-organising and self-learning are key to it. But I'll leave them with you to have to think about. And I'll leave you with one last point on the freedom to be happy, the business case for happiness, which is make a plan, write it down on no more than 1 page. But make a plan for putting happiness into your business, and the research says you will not only be more profitable, you will grow in a more sustainable way over a longer period of time. If you really love this stuff, I've created what we call the Happiness Revolution. It's a community on Slack called Happiness and Humans. It's for anyone. There's only one rule. You have to positively want to shape the future of work. If you don't want to do that, it's not for you, but I want people all around the world talking about this stuff. And for our children, your children, even if you don't have children, your nieces, your nephews, let's try and create a better business world for them. Let's create a better one to leave behind than the one that we found. Thank you for your time. I've really, really enjoyed being part of this. And I wish you all an amazing end of the year, and I hope that 2021 is a much happier and exciting year for all of us. Thank you.